I did not cry on my 33rd birthday. Sitting in my quiet Boston apartment, I watched the candle on my mini cake burn down at 11:47 at night. My phone remained dead silent. Then, I saw my brother Cole's post. My parents were laughing with him at a waterfront restaurant. The caption read, "Family dinner with the real MVP." They had not forgotten me. They simply chose a family without me. At midnight, I blew out the candle alone. My name is Quinn Howard. I turned 33 today. There was no grand celebration, no extravagant party, just a quiet evening planned in my Boston apartment. The dining table was wiped spotless, reflecting the warm, dim light of a single overhead bulb. At the center sat a miniature vanilla bean cake, carefully unboxed from the bakery down the street, and a bottle of Pinot Noir I had been saving for a decent occasion. I had set out one plate, one fork, and one wine glass, arranging them with the same meticulous precision I applied to my job as a senior revenue operations manager at Blue Lattice Signal Works. Earlier in the day, I had maintained a flawless facade of casual contentment. When my colleagues pinged me on Slack with their obligatory birthday emojis and digital confetti, I typed back with cheerful exclamation points. When my manager asked what my plans were for the evening, I let my fingers glide over the keyboard, crafting a comfortable, expected lie. I told him my family was coming over for a light dinner and drinks. It sounded perfectly normal. It was the kind of thing a 33-year-old woman with a stable career and a local family ought to be doing. The green dot next to my name projected availability and stability, masking the hollow ache that was beginning to take root in my chest. The silence in my apartment was not peaceful. It was a heavy, suffocating thing, far more terrifying than any screaming match I had ever endured. A screaming match implies engagement, a clash of passions or grievances. Silence is merely an absence. It is the void left behind when people simply do not care enough to make a sound. My phone sat face up on the edge of the kitchen island. Throughout the morning and afternoon, it remained agonizingly still. No calls, no texts, as daylight faded into dusk, and dusk surrendered to the deep navy blue of a New England night. The device became a cruel psychological experiment. Every occasional vibration sent a jolt of electric hope straight to my heart. I would lunge for it, my breath catching, only to find a promotional email from a clothing store offering 20% off, or an alert from a food delivery app telling me my dinner could be there in 30 minutes. With each false alarm, the hope curdled into a deeper, more profound humiliation. I was a grown woman, a senior corporate strategist, reduced to begging for a digital breadcrumb of affection from the people who shared my blood. The clock on my microwave glowed neon green. 11:47 at night, 13 minutes left of my birthday. The screen of my phone remained a black, empty mirror, not a single word from my mother. Denise, not a brief call from my father. Randall, not even a sarcastic, low-effort text from my older brother. Cole, in a moment of pathetic weakness, I broke my own rule. I unlocked my phone and opened Instagram. I told myself I was just mindlessly scrolling, but my thumb knew exactly what it was searching for, and there it was, sitting at the very front of the stories queue, a glowing ring around Cole's profile picture. I tapped it. The screen illuminated my dark living room with the warm, golden lighting of a high-end waterfront restaurant. The camera panned across a table laden with seared scallops, artisanal cocktails, and half-empty wine glasses, and then, the faces. My mother, leaning in and laughing with her eyes crinkled in genuine delight. My father, raising a glass of amber liquid to the camera, looking relaxed and proud. Finally, the camera flipped to Cole, who gave a smug, easygoing salute. The text overlaid on the video hit me harder than a physical blow. Family dinner with the real MVP. The video looped, once, twice, 3 times. The sound of their laughter echoed from my phone speaker, filling the dead air of my apartment. This was not an oversight. This was not a case of misplaced calendars or busy schedules. You forget a birthday when you are overwhelmed with work or distracted by an emergency. You do not forget a birthday when you are actively organizing a celebratory family dinner on the exact same night. They had not forgotten me. They had actively, consciously chosen to assemble a version of our family that simply did not include me. I stared at the screen until it went dark, then set the phone back down on the counter. I did not cry. There were no tears, no dramatic breakdown on the hardwood floor. Instead, a bone-deep, icy clarity washed over me. I walked over to the dining table and struck a match. The sulfur flared, smelling sharp and acrid. I lit the single, solitary candle sitting atop the miniature cake. The tiny flame flickered, casting long, wavering shadows against the walls. I looked at the empty chairs around the table. For years, I had been the safety net. I was the one who quietly transferred funds when the mortgage was short. I was the one who paid off the sudden credit card balances. I was the reliable, invisible infrastructure that allowed them to live their lives without consequence. Looking at the phantom dinner party on my phone, I finally understood my role. I was the financier of their happiness. I was the breathing emergency fund. I was the person who paid, never the person who was cherished. The clock rolled over to midnight. The day was officially over. I leaned forward and blew out the candle. The thin trail of gray smoke drifted up toward the ceiling and vanished. I picked up a fork, cut a small piece of the vanilla cake, and ate it in the dark. It tasted like ash and sugar. Right then, in the absolute stillness of my kitchen, I made a decision. I was not going to send a passive-aggressive text. I was not going to call my mother tomorrow and cry about how much they hurt me. I was not going to demand an apology that would inevitably be framed as my fault for being too sensitive. I was going to do absolutely nothing. I decided to match their silence with my own. I would not call. I would not text. I would not utter a single word about my birthday. I would close the vault, shut the doors, and simply wait in the dark to see exactly how long it would take for them to realize that their bank account had a name, a pulse, and a limit. Exactly 1 week passed. 7 full rotations of the Earth. 168 hours of absolute, unbroken radio silence from my parents and my brother. I went to work at Blue Lattice Signal Works, drank my black coffee, built my revenue projection models, and kept my phone face up on my desk. Nothing. Not a single missed call. Not a stray text asking how my week was going. The void was palpable, a physical weight pressing against my ribs every time I woke up in the morning. Yet, I held my ground. I operated like a machine, efficiently executing my daily tasks while a quiet, cold war raged inside my head. It happened on a Tuesday during my lunch break. The office was relatively quiet, most of my team having gone down to the cafeteria. I was eating a bland salad at my desk, reviewing a quarterly performance deck on my secondary monitor, when my phone screen suddenly lit up. A banner notification flashed across the glass. It was the family group chat, ironically named the Howard Clan. I felt a sudden, involuntary spike of adrenaline, a pathetic, lingering hope that maybe they had realized their mistake. My heart hammered against my sternum as I tapped the screen. It was Cole. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not acknowledge the glaring gap in our communication. Instead, he dropped a glossy, high-resolution web link into the chat. The thumbnail image showed a massive, blindingly white cruise ship cutting through glacial blue waters under a pristine sky. A 7-day luxury Alaskan voyage. Right beneath the link, Cole typed his pitch. Check this out. I have been putting together the ultimate family experience. We all need to get away and recharge. Before I could even process the sheer absurdity of the message, my mother, Denise, chimed in. Her texts arrived in rapid succession, buzzing aggressively against my wooden desk. Oh my goodness. Cole, it looks absolutely breathtaking. Those glaciers. A second later, another message popped up. This is exactly what we need. The family needs healing. A true bonding trip to reconnect. Healing. Reconnect. The words felt like coarse sandpaper scraping against my brain. They were talking about a family vacation, planning a grand gesture of unity, while casually ignoring the fact that they had excised me from their reality just 7 nights prior. Then came the killing blow. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was not a casual text message. It was an automated email notification forwarded directly into the chat, accompanied by a PDF attachment. I downloaded the file, my thumb hovering over the document. I opened it. It was a formal, digitally generated invoice. The header featured the slick, minimalist logo of Cole's latest imaginary venture, his so-called brand strategy studio. Billed to Quinn Howard. I scanned down to the itemized list, my eyes dragging across the screen. There, in crisp black and white typography, was the description: family share, parents' suite, upgrade plus port excursions, and at the bottom, the total due, $3,500. My vision blurred slightly, the edges of the screen swimming. I forced myself to reread the document. It was not a polite, sibling request to chip in for a nice gift. It was a bill. It was formatted like a corporate mandate, complete with a payment portal link and a bolded red note at the bottom. Payment due within 48 hours. Late fee of 5% applies thereafter. A late fee. My own brother was threatening me with a financial penalty for a vacation I was not even consulted about. A trip I was clearly not invited on. Back in the group chat, Cole sent a follow-up text. He adopted the breezy, confident tone of a benevolent executive delegating a minor administrative task to an intern. Hey Quinn, just sent over the breakdown for your half. You cover this part for Mom and Dad's upgrade and the helicopter tour, and I will reimburse you after my brand consulting contract comes in next month. So hyped for this. I sat perfectly frozen in my ergonomic office chair, the corporate hum of blue lattice signal works, the distant chatter of colleagues, the whir of the air conditioning. It all faded into white noise. I stared at the bright, glowing screen until my eyes burned and watered. There was no mention of my birthday. There was no belated apology for ghosting me on the one night of the year that was supposed to be mine. There was no inquiry about my well-being, no checking to see if I was alive or dead. The absolute audacity of it stole the breath straight from my lungs. They had ignored my existence until the exact moment they needed a cash injection. To them, I was not a daughter, I was not a sister, I was a breathing, walking corporate account, a reliable line of credit that never asked for interest or affection. Cole's promise of reimbursement was a transparent ghost. Over the past 9 years, I had bankrolled his podcast equipment, his dropshipping inventory, and the legal filing fees for his endless string of limited liability companies. I had never seen a single dime return to my bank account. This was the established dynamic. They planned the joy, they booked the luxury, they lived the experiences, and they handed me the check. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A tidal wave of hot, righteous rage urged me to type a blistering paragraph, to demand an explanation, to scream through the digital ether and tear down their delusions. I wanted to ask how the waterfront dinner was last week. I wanted to ask why my name was only worth typing when it was attached to a $sign, but the cold, icy clarity from a week ago returned, sharp and sobering. Arguing would mean engaging. It would mean stepping right back into my assigned role in their drama. If I complained, Cole would call me selfish and cheap. Denise would cry, play the victim, and say I was ruining the family healing process. I would automatically become the villain for refusing to fund their opulence. I closed the text thread. I did not type a single letter. I did not send a single emoji. I refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I pushed my half-eaten salad aside and pulled my company laptop closer to the edge of the desk. I minimized my work spreadsheets and opened a new, secure browser window. For years, I had operated on blind, familial trust. I had set up automated monthly transfers. I had added my parents as authorized users on my accounts. I had funded the joint emergency safety net without ever once looking at the detailed ledger, trusting that the money was there for a medical crisis or a true disaster. My hands were shaking now, but not from sorrow or rejection. It was the precise, electric adrenaline of an auditor who had just realized the books were cooked. I typed in the web address for my primary banking portal, entered my complex alphanumeric password, and prepared to look at the one thing in my life that never lied: the numbers, the banking portal took 3 seconds to load. In those 3 seconds, 9 years of history flashed through my mind. The pattern of my financial subjugation did not happen overnight. It began when I was 24 years old. I had just landed my first real salary, a junior analyst role with decent health benefits and a matching retirement plan. I was so incredibly proud, feeling like I had finally secured a foothold in the adult world. That exact same month, my father decided to take an early retirement. In reality, Randall got into a petty screaming match with his shift supervisor at the manufacturing plant and walked off the floor, throwing his hard hat into a dumpster. A week later, my mother called me. I remember the precise pitch of Denise's voice, frail, trembling, and weaponized with maternal desperation. She begged for help covering their monthly mortgage payment. She swore it was a temporary setback. Just this once. Quinn. She had sobbed through the receiver. We just need a bridge until your father figures things out. I paid the mortgage. I thought I was being a dutiful daughter, throwing a life preserver to the people who had raised me in a modest suburban home. But just this once morphed into a permanent, undeniable subscription to their survival. The mortgage payment quietly bled into the winter heating bills when the bitter Massachusetts freeze set in. Then came the transmission replacement for Randall's aging pickup truck. Then it was the sudden, unexplained hike in their insurance premiums, the minimum payments on Denise's maxed-out department store credit cards, and a brand-new stainless steel refrigerator, because the old one was making a funny humming noise. It was a slow, methodical bleed. I never saw a single dollar of that money returned. While my parents treated me like a municipal utility company, Cole treated me like an angel investor with absolutely zero voting rights. My older brother was a man of infinite, exhausting potential. He never held a standard, 9-to-5 job. Instead, he operated in grand phases. There was the podcast production agency phase, which required me to finance top-tier audio interfaces, studio microphones, and acoustic soundproofing foam. Then came the e-commerce dropshipping era, where my credit card absorbed the cost of pallets filled with cheap, imported junk. That was followed rapidly by a brief stint as a holistic mindset coach. Now, it was the brand strategy studio. I was the silent, invisible partner who funded the sleek silver laptop, the premium website hosting subscriptions, the state filing fees for his revolving door of limited liability companies, and even a month of rent for a trendy downtown co-working space, so he could take client meetings that miraculously never materialized. Over the years, a bizarre and deeply entrenched narrative took root in our family dynamic. At every Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas morning, or 4th of July barbecue, my parents would beam at Cole. They called him passionate, driven, and so incredibly warm. He was the golden boy chasing the modern American dream, constantly on the verge of his big break. I, on the other hand, was the cold, calculating corporate drone. Whenever I tried to share a professional milestone, like my promotion to senior manager or a successful software rollout, Denise would offer a tight, polite smile, pat my hand, and smoothly change the subject back to Cole's latest imaginary consulting contract. They viewed my income as sterile, a natural, emotionless byproduct of a soulless career. Because I wore blazers and looked at spreadsheets, my money was simply a resource to be mined. Cole's endeavors, however, were artistic, noble, and worthy of celebration. Sitting in my office at Blue Lattice Signal Works, staring at the spinning loading icon on my screen, I finally diagnosed the disease. We were not a traditional family. We were a highly dysfunctional, twisted corporation. I was the sole source of venture capital, pumping endless liquidity into a failing enterprise. Cole was the head of public relations, spinning intoxicating narratives of future wealth and success to keep the investors happy. Randall and Denise were the complacent board of directors, happily voting to distribute my hard-earned dividends to themselves while ignoring the company's impending bankruptcy. The screen flashed white, pulling me violently back to the present. The dashboard of my financial life populated across the monitor. I bypassed my personal checking and investment portfolios, clicking directly into the joint emergency savings account. This was the sacred vault, I had set it up specifically for my parents, funding it with an automatic transfer on the first day of every single month. It was designated exclusively for catastrophic medical deductibles, sudden home repairs, or genuine life-altering emergencies. I had trusted them implicitly, never auditing the balance, simply trusting that the safety net was resting securely beneath them. I pulled up the transaction history for the past 6 months. The ledger filled the screen, row after row of black text and red minus signs. I leaned closer to the monitor, my brow furrowing in deep confusion. The total balance was terrifyingly low, hovering just above zero, but the missing funds were not what made the bottom of my stomach drop out. It was the descriptions printed next to the outbound transfers. These were not withdrawals for property taxes, utility arrears, or pharmacy copays. The funds were flowing out in bizarre, highly structured increments. There were cryptic merchant codes, repeated Cash App withdrawals, and routing numbers connected to digital payment platforms I absolutely did not recognize. The money I had bled for, the funds I had sacrificed my own peace of mind to provide, was not sitting idle in a vault. It was being actively, methodically funneled into a completely different, hidden ecosystem. The banking interface loaded with sterile efficiency. I stared at the joint emergency ledger, my eyes locking onto the bolded number at the top of the screen. The available balance was exactly $17.42, just 2 weeks prior, on the first of the month. An automated clearinghouse transfer had deposited $800 into this exact account. Maintaining a routine I had blindly funded for years, it should have held thousands. Instead, it was thoroughly hollowed out. I clicked the drop-down menu to expand the transaction history for the current quarter. The screen populated with a cascading list of deductions, but none of them matched the profile of a retired couple living in the suburbs. There were no pharmacy copays, no municipal utility payments, and no grocery store runs. Instead, a chillingly different lifestyle emerged row by row. I saw a continuous stream of funding transactions to a popular mobile sports betting application, often in increments of $100 or $250, usually processed on Sunday mornings or Thursday nights. I scrolled further down. There were heavy tabs closed at premium downtown cocktail lounges, clocked at 1 or 2 in the morning. There were massive transactions at high-end consumer electronics retailers. Sprinkled between these major hits were dozens of charges for premium rideshare services, shuttling between the city center and my brother's apartment complex at all hours of the night. My 60-something parents were not gambling on professional football or drinking top-shelf liquor until closing time. This was Cole. The emergency vault had been functioning as his personal discretionary slush fund. A sharp, metallic taste flooded my mouth as I navigated to the custom date filter. I clicked the calendar icon and selected the exact date of my 33rd birthday. Exactly 7 days ago. I hit enter. A single, glaring transaction isolated itself on the white background. It was the name of the upscale waterfront seafood restaurant from the Instagram video. The total charge was $428.60. The timestamp proved it was processed while I was sitting alone in my dark apartment. Watching a candle burn down, I had quite literally financed the dinner where my family celebrated my exclusion. I paid for the seared scallops. I paid for the artisanal cocktails. I paid for the privilege of being forgotten. My heart rate remained dead and steady. I was no longer a grieving daughter. I had crossed a threshold, entering a cold, clinical state of operational focus. I was a system administrator investigating a massive data breach within my own life. I opened a new tab and logged into my primary credit card portal. I bypassed my personal spending summary and navigated straight to the authorized user management console. I clicked on Denise's profile. At the very top of her activity log sat a massive pending authorization. It was from a major international luxury cruise line. The timestamp on the pending charge was logged a full 72 hours before Cole even dropped the glossy Alaskan itinerary into our family group chat. They had not asked for my financial help. They had already used my credit line to secure their suite upgrade. I minimized the banking window and pulled up the digital invoice Cole had emailed me just minutes ago. Something about the document had bothered my subconscious. It was too polished, too automated. I scrutinized the payment gateway embedded at the bottom of the PDF. I clicked the small hyperlink labeled Manage Billing Profile. A secure browser window opened, revealing a customer portal hosted by a third-party payment processor. The system automatically populated a masked credit card number under my name, showing only the last 4 digits. I recognized those 4 digits instantly. It was my secondary travel rewards card. I had used that specific card 8 months ago to pay for his web hosting service when his brand strategy studio was just a concept. Cole had kept my credit card information saved as the default payment method within his own business invoicing software. The $3,500 invoice he sent was not a polite request for a sibling contribution. It was a receipt for an automated, fraudulent charge he was actively attempting to push through my stored credentials. He had framed it as a family share to make me feel obligated. Knowing full well he was just trying to bypass my consent entirely, the audacity was so profound it bordered on sociopathy. I opened my digital clipping tool. Working with surgical precision, I captured high-resolution screenshots of everything. I clipped the sports betting charges, the late-night ride shares, the pending luxury cruise authorization, and the fraudulent payment profile holding my stolen credit card data. I dropped every single image into a newly created, encrypted folder on my local drive. I was building a forensic paper trail. Then, the lockdown commenced. I moved through my digital infrastructure like a phantom, severing connections and sealing off vulnerabilities. I clicked back to the joint emergency ledger and hit the red button labeled Freeze Account. The status icon shifted from active to locked. I switched back to the credit card portal, selected Denise's authorized profile, and clicked Revoke Access. A prompt asked if I wanted to permanently deactivate her physical card. I clicked Confirm. I navigated to my primary checking dashboard and systematically canceled every single recurring auto-pay transfer associated with their names or their property. The financial quarantine was complete, but I was not finished. I opened a new browser tab for my mobile service provider. I logged into the Family Plan Management page. 3 secondary lines sat under my primary billing account. I clicked Remove Line for my father. I clicked Remove Line for my mother. I clicked Remove Line for my brother. The system generated a warning stating they would lose all cellular service and data access at midnight. I confirmed the action without a fraction of a second of hesitation. I opened my password manager. I generated complex, randomized strings of characters, and initiated forced network logouts across the board. I changed the master passwords for my premium streaming services, locking them out of my digital entertainment. I changed the access keys for my cloud storage arrays. I logged into the State Transit Authority portal and unlinked the electronic toll collection pass associated with my father's license plate. I stripped away every single invisible luxury I had provided them over the last decade. When the digital purge was finally complete, I picked up my phone. I opened the group chat. I did not draft a paragraph explaining my pain. I did not demand an apology or threaten legal action. I attached a single image from my camera roll. It was the cropped screenshot of the $428.60 restaurant charge from the night of my birthday, highlighting the merchant name and the timestamp. Beneath the image, I typed 2 words, account closed. I hit send, before any of them could even open the notification. I navigated to their individual contact profiles. I blocked Cole. I blocked Denise. I blocked Randall. I blocked them on regular text, on messaging applications, and on every social media platform I possessed. I set my phone face down on the desk, picked up my quarterly performance deck, and went back to work. It took exactly 4 minutes for the digital barrage to commence, though I had severed the direct lines of communication. The operating system of my smartphone still logged the attempts. A silent badge on my screen began to tick upward, registering 1 blocked call, then 3, then 7. Shortly after, the voicemail indicator illuminated. They were panicking. The structural integrity of their financial ecosystem had just collapsed, and the shockwaves were hitting them in real time. I ignored the phone and focused on my secondary monitor. A notification popped up in my personal email client. My mother had bypassed the blocked phone numbers. The subject line was written in all capital letters, spelling out the word emergency. I opened the message. The text was a masterclass in weaponized vulnerability designed to drag me right back into the role of the designated firefighter. She wrote that they were standing at the pharmacy counter and her card was declining. She claimed my father urgently needed his blood pressure medication and that the pharmacist was looking at them like criminals. She begged me to unlock the account just for today, promising we could talk about my feelings later. It was a targeted strike at my conscience. I did not reply. I created a new folder on my encrypted drive titled Incident Log and dragged her email directly into it. 2 minutes later, another email arrived. This one was from Cole. The polite, breezy tone he had used previously was entirely gone. His message was a frantic, aggressive block of text. He called me a selfish, childish brat throwing a tantrum over a misunderstanding. He flatly denied the reality of the dinner, claiming they were just meeting a potential client of his who happened to choose that specific location, and that I was twisting the narrative to play the victim. He ended the email with a direct threat, stating that if I did not restore the phone lines and the joint funds by 5 o'clock that evening, I would be dead to them. He thought the threat of abandonment would break me. He did not realize I had already emotionally buried that relationship. I dragged his email into the master folder right next to our mother's. I opened a blank document and began to build a chronological timeline. I worked with the same clinical detachment I used when auditing a flawed revenue pipeline. I cataloged the dates, the bank transfers, the invoices, the time-stamped screenshots, and the incoming hostile emails. I was no longer engaging in a sibling rivalry or a family dispute. I was compiling a dossier. Then, Cole escalated the war. At 2:15 in the afternoon, a new email materialized, but this time, it was in my corporate inbox. I froze. The sender was Cole, but he had not just emailed me. He had copied the public inquiries address for my entire company, ensuring that the customer success team, the marketing department, and potentially the executive assistants would see it. The subject line read, "Urgent family matter regarding Quinn Howard." I read the body of the text, my jaw tightening until my teeth ached. Cole had written a sickeningly sweet, deeply manipulative message masquerading as sibling concern. He wrote that my family was incredibly worried about my recent erratic behavior and sudden mental instability. He claimed I was experiencing a severe psychological crisis, severing ties with my support network, and exhibiting paranoid delusions. He politely asked whoever read the email to check on me, implying that I might not be fit to perform my duties. It was a calculated, vicious attempt to destroy my professional reputation. He knew my career was the only thing I had built entirely on my own, the only domain where I held absolute power. He was trying to burn it down to force me back into submission. I did not panic. I did not run to the restroom to cry. I saved the email as a secure file, added it to my evidence folder, and immediately drafted a message to the head of human resources and our internal legal counsel. I requested an urgent 15-minute meeting. I walked into the glass-walled conference room and sat down with them. I kept my posture straight and my voice entirely level. I informed them that I was currently the target of a financial extraction attempt by estranged family members. I explained that having cut off their access to my assets, my brother was now attempting to use the company as a vector for harassment. I handed over a printed copy of his email. I assured them my work would not be affected, but I needed the company firewalls to block his domain, and I needed a formal incident report filed to protect the firm's liability and my own standing. They were shocked by his audacity, but deeply appreciative of my proactive, professional approach. Legal flagged his email address across the network before I even left the room. I returned to my desk, feeling a strange, solid armor settling over my shoulders. 10 minutes later, a message popped up on our internal messaging system from a front desk receptionist. She asked if I had a moment to speak privately. I walked up to the reception area. My colleague looked uncomfortable. She lowered her voice, leaning across the polished stone counter. She told me that a man had just called the main switchboard. He had introduced himself as a licensed family counselor. He told the receptionist he was trying to coordinate an emergency intervention session and needed to know exactly what time I got off work and which parking garage I used. The receptionist, trained in corporate security protocols, had refused to provide any schedule details and hung up, but the implication hung heavily in the air between us. This was no longer a desperate grab for cash. This was a sophisticated, aggressive stalking campaign. Cole was actively trying to corner me in a physical space when I was vulnerable. He was trying to bypass my digital blockades by bringing the confrontation to the physical world, leveraging the authority of a fake medical professional to extract my location data. I thanked my colleague, asked her to log the exact time of the call, and requested that building security be notified not to admit anyone under the name of my parents or my brother. Walking back to my desk, the reality of the situation crystallized with absolute clarity. I sat down and added the fake counselor incident to my growing timeline. I downloaded the audio files of the voicemails my phone had intercepted, backing them up to 3 separate secure locations. I was preparing a comprehensive portfolio for a civil harassment case. For the first time in my entire adult life, the paralyzing, suffocating fear of losing my family completely vanished. The emotional tether had been cleanly severed. Looking at the mountain of evidence I had just compiled, I did not see a mother, a father, and a brother. I saw a coordinated threat. I saw a liability. I did not feel heartbreak or sorrow. I only felt an overwhelming, fierce necessity to defend my personal boundaries with the exact same ruthless efficiency I would use to protect a corporate bank account from an external fraud syndicate. I was ready for whatever move they tried next. The digital blockade I had erected around my immediate family was solid, but I had underestimated the permeability of the extended network. Cole, realizing he was entirely cut off from the direct source of his funding, pivoted his strategy. He took the war public. It started on a Thursday evening. A notification pinged on my tablet from Facebook, a platform I rarely checked. A cousin I had not spoken to in 3 years had tagged me in a lengthy, melodramatic comment thread. I clicked the alert and found myself staring at a public status update Cole had posted just 2 hours prior. He had crafted a masterpiece of vague, emotional manipulation. He wrote about the heartbreak of watching a successful sibling lose their moral compass. He lamented how money and corporate ambition could poison a person's soul, causing them to turn their back on the very parents who had sacrificed everything to raise them. He did not explicitly name me, nor did he mention the exact financial details. But the implication was clear and devastating. He was painting a portrait of a greedy, ruthless woman abandoning her aging, vulnerable family members. The comment section was a feeding frenzy of misplaced sympathy. Aunts, uncles, and distant relatives from across the country were chiming in. Within an hour, my secondary messaging apps began to light up. Messages slipped through from relatives I had not yet thought to block. Aunt Susan told me that blood is thicker than water. Uncle Robert sent a preachy paragraph about how money is just paper, but family is forever. They were parroting the exact narrative Cole had spoon-fed to them, completely blind to the reality of the situation. A burning, violent urge gripped me. I had the master folder sitting right on my desktop. I had the time-stamped restaurant receipt from the night they abandoned me. I had the logs of the sports betting deposits, the late-night ride shares, and the fraudulent invoice attempting to steal $3,500. I could take screenshots of every single document, upload them to a public album, and tag every hypocritical relative in the thread. I wanted to watch Cole's carefully constructed image burn to the ground in real time. But I pulled my hand away from the mouse. I am a data strategist. I know how information is consumed. The public does not read spreadsheets. They do not analyze merchant category codes or cross-reference timestamps. They react to raw emotion. If I retaliated by dumping a mountain of financial forensics onto a social media platform, I would not look like a victim seeking justice. I would look unhinged, petty, and vindictive. It would only validate Cole's narrative that I had lost my mind. I had to remain the ice to his fire. Then, the universe handed me a gift wrapped in digital incompetence. My phone buzzed with a message from Aunt Marlene, my mother's older sister. Marlene was notorious for struggling with basic technology. She sent me a long, lecturing message demanding I call my mother immediately to apologize. But beneath her text was a forwarded attachment. She had been trying to send me an inspirational quote, but instead, she had accidentally forwarded a screenshot taken from a completely different, hidden group chat containing the extended family. I opened the image. It was a direct message from Cole to the rest of the relatives. His text read, "Whatever you do not bring up the birthday thing with her. She is just using that as a distraction to make us look bad. Keep the focus entirely on the fact that she cut off Mom and Dad's lifeline out of nowhere. We need to pressure her into turning the accounts back on before the weekend." I stared at the screen, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. I took a high-resolution capture of Marlene's mistake. I now had definitive, irrefutable proof that Cole was not just reacting emotionally. He was actively, calculatingly driving a smear campaign. He knew exactly what he had done on my birthday, and he was deliberately orchestrating a cover-up to keep the extended family weaponized against me. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It was a coordinated harassment and defamation campaign. I closed my social media applications and opened a search engine. I did not look for a high-profile corporate lawyer. I needed a street fighter. I found a pragmatic, no-nonsense civil litigation attorney downtown who specialized in predatory personal debt, financial abuse, and family harassment. I sat in her office the following morning. I did not cry. I did not complain about my childhood. I simply handed her a physical binder containing my timeline, the fraudulent invoice, the drained account ledgers, the threatening emails, and the screenshot of Cole's admission of his cover-up. She flipped through the pages, her expression remaining perfectly stoic. When she reached the end, she looked up and told me I had built a better evidentiary trail than most private investigators. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, my attorney took control of the narrative. She drafted and dispatched 2 formal documents via certified mail and email to Cole, with copies sent to my parents. The first was a comprehensive cease and desist letter, legally demanding an immediate end to the harassment, the defamatory social media posts, and the attempts to contact my employer. The second document was far more aggressive. It was a preservation of evidence notice. It formally instructed Cole that he was legally required to retain every single text message, email, bank statement, and digital footprint related to his financial dealings with our parents and me, citing impending civil litigation regarding financial fraud and unauthorized credit utilization. Before I left her office, my attorney laid down the absolute rules of engagement. I was to maintain complete silence. I was not to answer a single phone call from any unknown number. I was not to agree to any private meetings. If they somehow managed to breach my boundaries and force a response, I was to reply only in writing, keeping every word entirely factual and devoid of emotion. I went home that evening feeling a profound sense of security. The legal firewall was up. I poured myself a glass of water and watched the city lights flicker outside my window. I assumed the threat of a lawsuit would force Cole into a panicked retreat. I assumed wrong. Just before midnight, an email bypassed my spam filter. It was sent from a newly created, anonymous address, but the aggressive cadence was unmistakably his. The legal threats had not intimidated him. They had severely wounded his ego. The message contained no apologies, no backtracking, and no fear. "You think you can scare me with some cheap suit lawyer?" he wrote. "You think you can just hide behind paperwork and pretend you are the victim here? Fine, you want to play hardball. I am done trying to fix this over the phone. I am coming down there to talk to you face to face like an adult, and you are going to listen." The confrontation materialized on a Friday morning. I stepped out of the elevator bank and into the expansive, sunlit atrium of the Blue Lattice Signal Works building. It was exactly 8:45 in the morning, the peak rush hour for corporate arrivals. The lobby was a cavernous space of polished marble, echoing footsteps, and the low hum of professional chatter. I was holding a fresh coffee, mentally reviewing my schedule for the day, when I saw them. They were clustered around the main reception desk, effectively blocking the primary security turnstiles. Cole, Denise, and Randall, Cole was currently delivering an Oscar-worthy performance. He was leaning over the high granite counter, speaking urgently to the head of building security. His face was sculpted into a perfect mask of grave, agonizing brotherly concern. Even from 40 feet away, I could hear the practiced, soothing cadence of his voice. He was telling the uniformed guard that I was in the middle of a severe psychological breakdown. He explicitly used the phrase "danger to herself," insisting that the family needed immediate access to my floor to safely escort me back home to receive medical attention. Denise was playing her supporting role flawlessly. She stood just behind Cole, clutching her purse to her chest, her shoulders shaking with loud, theatrical sobs. The pristine acoustics of the lobby amplified her crying, turning heads across the atrium. Commuters paused with their security badges hovering over the scanners. A group of visiting executives stopped by the coffee kiosk to stare. My mother was weaponizing her tears to create a public spectacle, forcing the company to view me as a liability. Randall stood a half step behind them both. He looked intensely out of place under the modern, geometric chandeliers. He shifted his weight awkwardly from foot to foot, his hands jammed deep into the pockets of his faded khakis. He looked embarrassed by the sheer volume of the scene, yet he remained firmly planted on their side of the battle line, lending silent, patriarchal authority to Cole's fabricated crisis. The old version of me would have felt a spike of pure terror. The old me would have spun around, slammed the elevator button, and hidden in a locked bathroom stall on the 10th floor until security managed to escort them off the premises. The woman who walked out of that elevator did not break her stride. I did not hide, and I did not retreat. I walked directly toward the epicenter of their manufactured drama. My heels clicked a steady, rhythmic, and unhurried cadence against the marble floor. Cole spotted my approach first. His eyes widened, an entirely fake expression of profound relief washing over his features. He immediately pivoted away from the security desk and threw his arms wide open. He took 3 large, aggressive steps toward me, moving in to envelop me in a tight physical embrace. He was trying to trap me in the visual optics of a loving, concerned family rescuing a sick relative right in front of my colleagues. I stopped my forward momentum exactly 3 feet away from him. I did not step back. I simply raised my right hand, palm facing outward, fingers rigid. It was a universal, unmistakable command to halt. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was completely devoid of anger, sadness, or fear. It was entirely flat. It carried the cold, absolute authority of a senior manager dismissing an insubordinate employee in front of the entire department. Cole froze in his tracks. His arms dropped a fraction of an inch, his forced smile twitching at the corners. He quickly turned his head slightly to his left, ensuring the security guards were watching my supposedly erratic, hostile rejection of his love. Denise saw the rejection and escalated her tactics. She let out a loud, wavering wail, stepping past Cole and reaching out a trembling hand toward my shoulder. "Sweetie, please," she cried, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "We are so terrified for you. You are completely lost right now. You are not thinking straight. Let us take you home." I did not lower my volume to protect their dignity. I projected my voice, ensuring the sharp syllables bounced off the high ceiling and reached the ears of the security personnel, the receptionists, and the lingering spectators near the elevators. "There is absolutely no crisis happening here today," I announced, my gaze sweeping across the small crowd of onlookers before locking directly onto the head security guard. "The only thing happening in this lobby is that I have permanently stopped paying the living expenses of 3 fully grown adults, and now they are staging a public tantrum to extort me." A collective, stunned silence fell over the immediate vicinity. The security guard lowered his radio, his expression shifting from concern to deep skepticism as he looked at Cole. Cole's jaw tightened so hard I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. The concerned brother facade slipped for a microsecond, revealing raw, unadulterated venom beneath. "You are sick, Quinn," he hissed, dropping the volume of his voice so only I could hear the threat. "Stop making a scene and get your things." I ignored him entirely. I reached into my leather tote bag, anticipating further harassment after my attorney sent the legal notices. I had started carrying a thin, black plastic folder with me everywhere. I pulled it out, flipped the cover open, and extracted 2 crisp, color-printed sheets of paper. I stepped smoothly past Cole, ignoring his presence entirely, and walked right up to the granite reception desk. I slapped the first sheet face up on the polished stone, directly under my mother's gaze. "Take a good look at that." "Denise," I instructed, my tone purely clinical. It was the printed bank ledger detailing the exact $428.60 charge from the waterfront seafood restaurant. I pointed my index finger directly at the merchant name, the date, and the timestamp. Denise's crying hitched. The loud, theatrical sobs stopped abruptly, replaced by a sharp intake of breath. She looked down at the paper, her eyes scanning the bold black ink, her brow furrowed in genuine, unscripted confusion. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice completely losing its artificial tremble. "Cole told us he paid for that dinner. He said it was a massive treat from his new consulting client. I did not give Cole a single second to spin a new lie to cover the old one. I immediately dropped the second sheet of paper right next to the first one. It was the high-resolution screenshot of Denise's authorized user profile from my credit card portal, clearly displaying the massive pending authorization from the luxury cruise line. "And this," I said, my finger tapping the heavy paper with a sharp, rhythmic thud, "is the $3,500 cruise charge you attempted to run through my credit card." Notice the exact date at the top corner. Denise stared at the second document, the blood slowly and visibly draining from her face. She looked at the date of the pending charge, then slowly turned her head to look at Cole. For the first time in her life, a visible, jagged fracture appeared in her absolute, unquestioning faith in her golden boy. But it was not Denise who delivered the fatal blow to Cole's carefully constructed reality. It was Randall. My father had been standing silently, staring over Denise's shoulder, reading the numbers and dates in the quiet aftermath of the revelation. He suddenly cleared his throat, the sound rough and dry in the quiet lobby. He looked up at his son, his eyes squinting in deep, troubled confusion. "Wait a minute," Randall said, his voice slow and heavy, entirely stripping away the drama of the moment. "Cole, this pending charge for the ship. The date printed on this paper says the transaction was processed on Tuesday morning." Cole swallowed hard. I watched his Adam's apple bob nervously. His eyes darted rapidly between Randall, Denise, and the unblinking, judgmental stare of the building security guard. "Dad, it is just a clerical error from the booking agent." Cole stammered, his confident, booming baritone cracking noticeably for the very first time. "They mess up the timestamps all the time, but you did not even ask her if she wanted to go on the trip until Tuesday afternoon," Randall continued, completely ignoring the weak excuse. His mind was finally, agonizingly connecting the chronological dots. "You ran her card before you even sent that glossy itinerary to our group chat. You told your mother and me that Quinn had already agreed to upgrade our suite before you booked it." For the first time in his entire life, the golden boy had absolutely nothing to say. He stood frozen under the geometric chandeliers, his mouth slightly open, the grand illusion of his success and generosity shattering into 1,000 pieces right there on the marble floor. The aftermath of the lobby confrontation did not result in immediate apologies. Instead, the public humiliation shattered the foundational myth of our family, forcing a reluctant, agonizing compliance. 48 hours later, my father sat rigidly in a leather chair across from my civil litigation attorney. He had agreed to this meeting only because the alternative was facing a formal subpoena. My attorney slid a thick manila folder across her mahogany desk. She had run a comprehensive background check and pulled full credit histories, digging far deeper than my initial sweep of the joint accounts. The atmosphere in the room was entirely clinical. We were no longer discussing hurt feelings. We were dissecting a financial crime scene. She opened the file and extracted a multi-page commercial credit agreement. It was for a small business revolving line, registered to the brand strategy studio my brother claimed to be operating. "Look at the guarantor signature on page 4, my attorney instructed, her tone perfectly flat. My father leaned forward, adjusting his reading glasses, all the color instantly drained from his weathered cheeks. It was his own digital signature, time-stamped exactly 14 months ago. Randall swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he held the document. He confessed, his voice barely above a whisper, that Cole had brought a tablet to the house one Sunday afternoon. My brother had framed it as routine paperwork, claiming he needed a secondary reference to secure a better interest rate for his business equipment. He had rushed Randall through the electronic prompts, promising it was just a formality. My father, prioritizing his son's ambition over basic financial literacy, had blindly signed his name without reading a single clause. The deception went much deeper. My attorney pulled out a flow chart she had mapped out, using the partial banking records we had recovered. The $800 I faithfully deposited into the joint emergency fund every single month was not merely being siphoned for late-night ride shares and sports bets. That was only the overflow. The primary function of my monthly deposit was to cover the minimum corporate payment on Randall's fraudulent business account. Cole was using my money to keep the commercial credit line out of default, thereby protecting his own access to a massive pool of borrowed capital. My father realized in that exact moment that his passivity had transformed him from a victim into an unwitting accomplice. He had handed Cole the keys to my vault to facilitate his own financial ruin. The weighted silence in the office was broken by the sound of the heavy wooden door opening. My mother, Denise, walked in. She had been waiting in the reception area, too ashamed to participate in the financial audit, but she was not empty-handed. She clutched a slightly crushed lavender paper gift bag. Her eyes were completely dry, devoid of her usual theatrical tears. Instead, she looked hollowed out. She placed the bag on the polished conference table and pushed it toward me. I recognized the handwriting on the attached envelope immediately. It was my own, 2 months ago, for her 60th birthday. I had ordered a custom-engraved silver bracelet she had admired in a catalog. I had mailed it directly to the house with a heartfelt card. I never received a thank you text, a phone call, or even an acknowledgement that it had arrived. At the time, I had simply added the slight to the mounting pile of evidence that they did not care about me. Denise spoke, her voice cracking with raw, unvarnished pain. She explained that she had gone out to the driveway that morning to look for a missing insurance document in the trunk of Cole's sport utility vehicle, which he frequently parked at their house, hidden beneath the spare tire compartment, buried under a pile of old gym clothes. She had found the lavender bag. The envelope was still perfectly sealed. "He hid it," Denise whispered, looking at the silver bracelet now resting on the mahogany table. "He intercepted the mail carrier. He took the package and shoved it in his trunk. For 2 months, he sat at our dinner table and told me that you were too obsessed with your corporate career to even send a card for my milestone birthday. He told us you were cold. He told us you did not love us anymore." The financial fraud had broken my father, but this physical piece of evidence broke my mother. This was no longer a story of an ambitious son cutting corners to fund his dreams. It was a calculated, predatory campaign of emotional isolation. Cole had actively engineered a wedge between us to ensure he remained the sole focus of their loyalty, keeping the financial pipeline completely under his control. I looked at my parents. They were broken, aging, and stripped of all their grand illusions. I felt a brief, sharp pang of pity, but I immediately smothered it beneath the heavy armor of self-preservation. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream at them for being foolish enough to believe his lies. I offered them a singular, binary choice. My attorney placed a freshly printed legal document between them. It was a sworn affidavit. "This document outlines the absolute truth," I said, maintaining direct eye contact with Randall. "It states that Cole misused the emergency funds without my knowledge, that he fraudulently used my credit profile, and that he secured commercial debt under false pretenses. You have 2 options right now. You sign this affidavit, formally testifying to his actions, or I leave this office, file a civil lawsuit, and name both of you as co-defendants in a conspiracy to commit fraud." There was no negotiation. There were no pleas for family unity or blood loyalty. The stark legal reality hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Randall did not hesitate. The patriarchal pride that had kept him tethered to Cole's defense had completely evaporated. He picked up the black ink pen resting on the table. His hand shook, but he signed his name on the bottom line, officially documenting his son's betrayal. Denise followed suit, her signature shaky and uneven, sealing their defection from Cole's fabricated reality. I left the office holding the physical proof of my liberation. The legal net was fully assembled, and my parents were finally on the outside of it, leaving Cole entirely exposed. Later that evening, as I was preparing dinner in my quiet apartment, my laptop chimed with a new incoming message. It was an email from Cole, bypassing my digital blockades by using yet another newly generated address. Despite losing his financial backing, despite the catastrophic exposure in the corporate lobby, and despite his parents discovering his profound manipulations, his arrogance remained entirely intact. He did not attempt to apologize or beg for a truce. The subject line simply read, "Bon voyage." The body of the email was a single, defiant sentence. "You can keep your spreadsheets and your lawyers, but the family is still going to Alaska, and we are setting sail with or without you." He was doubling down, playing his final hand as if he still controlled the board, completely unaware that the ground beneath him had already been permanently condemned. 5 days remained until the massive, blindingly white ship was scheduled to leave the harbor. The countdown had officially begun, and instead of retreating, my brother decided to double down on his delusional reality while I was fortifying my legal and financial borders. Cole was busy curating his digital fantasy, my attorney's paralegal, who was monitoring his public social media presence for our harassment case, forwarded me a screenshot of his latest post. It featured a generic, glossy stock image of an Alaskan glacier. The caption was a masterclass in aggressive denial. "The Howard family remains stronger than ever," he wrote. "We cannot wait to disconnect from the negativity and set sail this weekend. Family first. Always." He was publicly committing to the voyage, but the math simply did not make sense. I had completely frozen his access to the joint emergency vault. I had successfully blocked the $3,500 invoice he had attempted to push through my stored credit profile. A luxury suite upgrade and premium helicopter excursions required immediate, liquid capital. My attorney, utilizing the financial discovery channels we had opened, quickly unraveled his survival strategy. Cole had intercepted our parents' annual federal tax refund, a sum of $4,200 that had been deposited into their primary checking account just days prior. But that was not enough to cover the exorbitant balance he had racked up. To bridge the gap, he had taken out a predatory short-term personal loan with a staggering interest rate. Using his brand strategy studio as the collateral shell, he was gambling everything on a singular, desperate bet. He believed that once they were physically on the ship, smiling in the dining room and taking photos by the glaciers, the resulting financial catastrophe would eventually become my problem to solve. He thought the old dynamic would inevitably reassert itself. He was catastrophically wrong. My legal team struck back with surgical precision. My attorney drafted a formal, comprehensive notice of dispute. She transmitted it simultaneously to the Fraud Investigation Department of my primary banking institution and the Corporate Risk Management Division of the luxury cruise line. The legal directive attached to the documents was explicitly clear. I was not demanding the vindictive cancellation of Randall and Denise's vacation. If they wished to board that vessel using legally obtained funds and their own lines of credit, they were entirely free to do so. However, my demand was non-negotiable. I required my name, my personal billing profile, and my digital footprint to be completely eradicated from the reservation. I demanded that the unauthorized pending authorizations be officially coded as fraudulent activity, 72 hours before embarkation. The silence from my parents' house was finally broken, but not by a frantic phone call or a manipulative email. A formal message arrived, channeled strictly through my attorney's office. It was from Denise. There was no theatrical crying this time. There were no desperate pleas for family unity or attempts to drag me back into the role of the designated savior. The exposure of Cole's deep, calculated deception with the hidden birthday gift had fundamentally altered her perception of the war. She asked my lawyer one singular, terrifyingly specific question: exactly how much do we owe her? I sat at my dining room table, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the dark wood. I opened my master financial spreadsheet. For years, I had deliberately avoided looking at the aggregate total, fearing that the sheer weight of the number would crush me. But I was no longer afraid. I calculated every single mortgage bridge I had covered. I added the winter heating bills, the transmission repairs, the podcast microphones, the website hosting fees, the fraudulent business credit payments, and the years of methodically drained emergency funds. I sent the final, exact tally back through the legal channel: $92,450. It was a number heavy enough to shatter whatever fragile, remaining illusions they still harbored about my supposed selfishness. The impact of that figure caused a massive, structural tremor within their household. Through the subsequent legal communications, I learned that Randall had immediately demanded they cancel the trip. The suffocating reality of the accumulated debt, combined with the shame of the commercial loan fraud, had finally broken his passive complicity. He wanted to stay home and face the ruin, but Cole, backed into a corner of his own making, unleashed a torrent of psychological warfare against his own parents. He argued that canceling the voyage at the 11th hour would result in catastrophic public humiliation. He reminded them that the extended family was watching closely, waiting to see if my narrative of their financial abuse was true. If they stayed home, he insisted, they were admitting defeat and proving me right. He told them they had to board that ship to save face, to prove to the world that they were independent and successful without my money. 48 hours before the ship was scheduled to leave port, my phone rang. It was my attorney. She had just received an urgent communication directly from the cruise line's corporate risk management division. The security holding pattern we had requested had been triggered because of the conflicting billing profiles, the legally disputed initial deposits, and the sudden, suspicious influx of third-party funds from Cole's high-interest loan. The booking was locked down. The risk desk agent informed my lawyer that they could not, under any circumstances, process the boarding passes digitally. The automated system had flagged the itinerary for severe financial inconsistencies. They required a mandatory, in-person verification at the embarkation terminal. They needed to physically match the credit cards to the identities on the passenger manifest before anyone was allowed to step foot on the gangway. The agent was explicit. If the original account holder, which was me, did not physically authorize the initial transfer, or if the new payment methods failed the final fraud check at the desk, the entire party would be denied boarding by port security. I hung up the phone and looked out the window of my apartment. I could have easily stayed home. I could have let the legal machinery handle the execution from a safe, comfortable distance, simply waiting for the inevitable notification that their boarding had been denied. But simply watching the system reject them was not enough. I had spent 9 years being an invisible, silent financier. I had spent my 33rd birthday sitting alone in the dark while my name was used to fund their joy. I needed this closure to be absolute, physical, and undeniable. I opened my email and sent a brief message to my attorney, instructing her to clear her schedule for Saturday morning. I was going to the port. I was not going down there to pay their balance, and I was certainly not going down there to save their grand family vacation. I was going to walk into that terminal, stand directly in front of the risk management desk, and personally ensure that my name would never be used as a living wallet ever again. The embarkation terminal was a chaotic symphony of rolling luggage, excited chatter, and booming announcements. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the massive glass windows of the port facility, illuminating the colossal white hull of the ship docked just outside. I walked through the sliding automatic doors with my attorney by my side. I held a single, thin manila folder. I felt no anxiety, no urge to scream, and no desire for a public spectacle. Across the cavernous room, at the priority boarding counter, Cole was putting on the performance of a lifetime. He was dressed in crisp linen trousers and a tailored navy blazer, looking every inch the benevolent, successful son orchestrating a luxury getaway. He was gesturing expansively, trying to charm the stern-faced agent behind the plexiglass barrier. My parents stood behind him, looking exhausted and out of place amidst the jubilant vacationers. My lawyer and I approached the counter just as the agent, a no-nonsense woman with a supervisor badge, was shaking her head. We stepped up, maintaining a deliberate physical distance from my brother. The supervisor glanced at my attorney's business card, then at me. We had an appointment with the risk management desk. She pulled up the disputed reservation on her monitor. The screen reflected in her glasses as she listed the glaring anomalies. She pointed out that the massive suite upgrade fee was authorized against my profile days before I was ever notified. Furthermore, the primary contact email for the financial guarantor was listed under Cole's brand strategy domain, completely bypassing my own verification protocols. Cole immediately tried to seize control of the narrative. He leaned heavily against the counter, flashing a tight, desperate smile. He claimed it was all just a massive misunderstanding. He told the supervisor I was simply having a stressful week and had decided to change my mind about my generous gift at the very last minute. He waved his hand dismissively, acting as if my presence with legal counsel was just an overly dramatic sibling tantrum. I did not argue. I simply opened my thin folder and slid the printed timeline, the time-stamped invoice emails, and the official bank dispute confirmation across the counter. The paper trail was absolute. There was no misunderstanding. It was unauthorized use. The supervisor reviewed the documents, her expression hardening. She informed Cole that my profile was permanently scrubbed from the booking. To release the boarding passes, the remaining balance had to be cleared immediately with a physical card present. Cole turned to Randall, his mask slipping slightly. He sharply instructed our father to hand over his secondary credit card, the one entirely separate from the frozen joint accounts. Randall, looking utterly defeated by the public scrutiny, pulled the plastic from his wallet and handed it to the agent. She swiped it. The machine beeped, emitting a harsh, flat sound of rejection. The agent typed a few commands into her keyboard and frowned. She informed my father that the transaction was entirely blocked by his issuing bank, because his secondary card was linked to the same master profile currently under active investigation for the fraudulent commercial loan. The fraud department had placed a global freeze on all his available credit lines. The final safety net vanished. The reality of the situation crashed down upon Cole all at once. There was no secret fund. There was no last-minute bailout. He was trapped at the port with a massive bill he could not cover and a ship he could not board. And right there, in front of the ticket agents, the security guards, and dozens of waiting passengers, Cole completely lost his mind. The charming, successful facade shattered, revealing the raw, entitled parasite beneath. He slammed his fist against the counter. His face flushed a dark, angry red. He spun around and pointed a trembling finger directly at my face. He screamed that I was nothing but a walking automated teller machine, a soulless corporate drone who only existed to write checks. Then, he turned his venom on our parents. He threw his arms up in disgust, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. He blamed them. He yelled that it was their fault for being weak, for not pressuring me the way they always had, for letting me get away with ruining his perfect plan. That single, vicious outburst accomplished what 9 years of my financial suffering could not. It destroyed the illusion forever. Denise physically recoiled, taking 3 steps backward as if she had been struck. She looked at Cole, not as her golden boy, but as a stranger who viewed her simply as a tool to extract my wealth. Randall straightened his posture. The passive, confused older man vanished, replaced by a father who finally saw the absolute ruin his son had brought upon their family. He stepped forward, his voice completely steady and devoid of its usual hesitation. He demanded that Cole hand over the keys to his vehicle, the family financial documents stored in the glove box, and the mobile phone that I was no longer paying for. Cole stared at him, stunned into silence. He realized he had just severed his final lifeline. I stood perfectly still. I did not offer to pay the balance. I did not offer a compromise to save their vacation. I looked directly at my parents, ensuring my voice was clear and resonant. I am not closing the door on my family. I stated simply, I am closing down the system that exploits me. My lawyer tapped her briefcase, signaling that our business was concluded. I turned and walked away from the risk management desk. I did not look back to see Cole's reaction. 10 minutes later, I stood by the curb outside the terminal. Randall and Denise walked out through the automatic doors. They did not board the ship. They had chosen to leave the port with me. We stood in the warm Saturday morning air, and for the first time in a decade, there were no secrets between us. Through my attorney, they formally agreed to sign the structured repayment plan and legally establish the new, ironclad boundaries of our relationship. Cole was left standing alone at the counter inside, surrounded by luggage he could not take anywhere, facing a collapsed booking and a mountain of debt that, for the very first time in his life, he would have to pay himself. That evening, I returned to my quiet Boston apartment. I prepared a simple dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat down at my dining table. I did not check my phone. I was no longer waiting for a notification, a thank you, or an apology that would never come. The silence in my home was no longer terrifying. It was deeply, profoundly peaceful. I ate my dinner alone, finally living by the cold, beautiful truth instead of a suffocating obligation. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please leave a comment down below and let me know where in the world you are listening from so we can interact and share our thoughts together. Do not forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support me even more by hitting the hype button so that the story in this video can be heard by many more people.